I'm excited to be here. I know that you guys have a lot of things that you're trying to get done over the next few days, and I appreciate the fact that you allowed me to join and have a conversation with you about becoming a CRM Ready organization. So a couple of things to know. Actually, this will be the only time that I talk about me, and the reason why I have to do it up front is because I want you to understand where I'm coming from. I have been doing CRM-related stuff for 25 plus years. I have worked with virtually anything that anybody in that room has ever worked with, including custom software, Siebel. I've worked with Goldmine. I've worked with Access. I've worked with Microsoft Dynamics CRM since it was in beta. And the primary things that I focus on are what's going on in the organization, business process, and sales. So what I want to get out of today for you guys, what I want you to get out of it, is I just want to start you thinking about where you want to go from here. This is not about systems. This is about the organization, right? What are we trying to do? And so rather than do the introduction thing that I would normally do, what I want to do is I want to give you a couple of questions to think about together as we go into the session. So you don't have to answer them now, but as we come out of the session, it's kind of what I'm hoping that you'll start to really dig in and have real conversations with each other about. So the first question is, how are you actually thinking about CRM as a business? This is very, very important. And the reason why it's so important is because that's the guide marker that I use when I get called into a company that's failing with CRM and can't figure out what to do. When I listen to how they talk about CRM, it is a great indicator to me of whether or not they're going to be successful or not. It seems like a really small thing, but it's not. It's huge because it affects the way that you do everything. And so this is what I mean. If you're thinking about CRM as an installation, as many companies do, you have a, if we build it, they will come dream, right? We'll put it out there and the salespeople will love it and they'll be using mobile and it'll change our business and we'll just move on to doing OneNote or the next piece we're going to install and that's it. If you're thinking about it in that way, the chances of you succeeding are nil to nil. If you're thinking about initiative, meaning this is not software that we're installing, it is an initiative that the company is undertaking, right? It's a thing that we're doing that happens to include software. It's a subtle difference, but if you can get to where at the end of the day you're thinking about this as an initiative and it's going to be ongoing forever, but it's going to continue to drive value and benefit to the organization because of the way that we're thinking about it, then you have a high chance of being successful at the end of the day. So that's the first question. You don't have to answer it. Hopefully you're looking at each other and already starting to get an idea of where we sit. Question number one. Question number two. Do we know what success means for us? My guess is going to be that because this whole thing, the whole coming together and what we're going to do and all that is so new that you probably have not really dug into that. But hopefully coming out of our session today, you're going to have a framework for doing that, and you'll start to have that discussion before you even get into what the software is going to do or not do for you. What does it mean for us to be successful with CRM, both now and in the future? And that's important, and I'm going to show you why in just a minute. And the third question is, what really needs to happen for us to be successful? What do we actually need to do as an organization? If you've been at this for any amount of time, you already know that just getting the software in place and maybe doing one set of training is not how this works, right? It's not how it works well. So by the end of this, I want you guys to come together and look at where you are and say, okay, these are the things that we really need to do. Let's decide if we're willing to do them, and if we are, let's come up with a plan to roll that out. All right, so here's one thing that I can tell you. Here's what all that 30 years tells you. I'm gonna cull it down into the part of where we are that makes me the most sad. When I first started my first business in CRM way back when, I used to do seminars. And in the seminars, what I would talk about is the failure rate of CRM, right? How often companies fail and see it as a failure, and it was ridiculous. Right? The numbers at the time were somewhere between, depending upon who you asked and whether it was Gartner or a software company or whatever it was, but the numbers were between 65 and 85% of all CRM initiatives fail. And the part that makes me the most sad, right, if you listen to Garth, we just came from CRM UG. And at CRM UG, it's Microsoft, and look at all this great stuff that's coming out, and we're doing Dynamics 365 in the cloud and Power BI and mobile, and it's beautiful, and the software just better and better. I started in 1.0. It was horrible. The software now can do anything that you want it to do. The part that makes me sad is that the numbers that you're looking at, I just pulled. The numbers haven't changed. Companies are still failing, even though the software keeps getting better and better. I want you to keep that in your mind. What we're doing is not about the software. The software you guys have is awesome, don't get me wrong. But the software is not what's going to determine whether you succeed or fail. Companies are failing at exactly the same rate, give or take, depending upon who you ask, as they were 20 years ago. And if you look at that and you think, well, you know, some of these guys might have something to gain or whatever it is, even if it's half that, if they're off by 50%, that's ridiculous. And so our goal today, walking out of, you know, our session and starting to have these conversations, is to end up in the 35%. The 35% that do succeed, not the 65% that fail. So we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about failure. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about what it actually looks like, what successful organizations look like, so that you can pattern yourself around that. So the question that usually comes up when we start to talk about failure rate is somebody will say, well, what exactly do they mean by successful? And that's a really good question. And if you think back to the first one that I asked you, what does success mean for us? That's where I'm going with it. But here is a way for you to think about what success means. The CRM is not like Word, right? In Word, success means I can get a document out the door. With CRM, success should equate to impact, meaning it's changing something in the business. You're moving the needle in a way that matters. You have a coordinated effort across to do things better, to improve your profitability, reduce the amount of time that it takes to respond to a customer, whatever those things are. So success equals impact. And if you picture in your mind, and I'll show you one later, you know how when you're getting ready to buy software, they'll always shoot you a case study of some customer and it says, you know, reduce their lead response time by X% and all of that. Do you know how you get those numbers? You plan for it. Exactly what it is that you're trying to move, and you build your system to do that. So when we talk about what impact is, what success is, and we come back and ask ourselves 3 years from now, well, did we succeed? We should be able to point to the impact that CRM has had on our business because we chose those pieces of impact. Because that's what we tried to do. That's the mindset that we need to be in. So this is the dream page, I think I'm going to call it for us. This chart right here, I often go out and do a what we call executive sessions for customers that are either trying to get revamped and figure out where they want to go or understand where they are or how to improve, etc. And when I first started talking through this process, I thought that it would be a 10-minute conversation. And in most cases, if you have anybody in the organization that's been involved in the initiative for a while, it turns into hours sometimes, just about where we are. So I want you guys to understand where this is. We're not going to spend hours on it, but this is where we are trying to go. And so what I want you guys to do, based on which division of the company or which company you're in and where your initiative is, think through where you are in this process. So the way that you think about it is down at the very bottom. That's where most customers start. You see where it says disconnected? What does disconnected mean? Disconnected means we're doing a whole bunch of things in spreadsheets and Outlook and all kinds of things that are not coordinated. We have no way to see each other's anything. We're not updating in real time. We spend lots of time spreadsheets and putting information together only to redo it because it never goes any place central, and we're not really connected at all. That's often the conversation that drives CRM in the first place. And so then you hit that installed stage. Installed is what I was talking about earlier. That means that we got CRM, got some software, and we installed it, and maybe we did some training on it, and it's just sitting there. We haven't really talked about what we want from it. Some people might be using it because they like it, so they're creating appointments or doing their own thing, but the company, the organization is getting no real value from it because we're not all using it consistently. We haven't gone overboard with training, and we're not driving anything through it. So you're in that installed state. One of the things that customers will often say, or companies will often say when they're in that zone, is they will use words like, well, it's just a really expensive Rolodex at this point, because you're not driving any value. And you're actually, if you notice that line right there, that line is about, if you're going to stay in that installed area, I would suggest not doing it at all, because you get no real value from it, and you've spent a lot of money and a lot of time to get no real benefit in most cases. The next case is where 80% of the customers that I talk to, and even when we were at CRM Eugene, we had a room of 85, 90 people in there, almost to a one, everyone said that they were either at installed or adopted, or working on trying to get through adopted. And this is what that means. Adopted means that you have delivered what we call level 1 training to your team, and you have enforced it. So I want to explain that really quick. Level 1 training. When we started off at the beginning, what I said was, what is it that we're actually trying to get from CRM? Right? There is a process that we'll have you go through or show you how to go through at some point downstream, which is about generating business outcomes. And in business outcomes, what you're saying is, what do we want in this phase, in this release? Well, we want to get visibility into the pipeline so that we can start to improve our conversion ratios. We want to start to drive more visits to our accounts because we know that the more we visit, the more likely they are to buy more stuff from us and the longer they're going to stay with us, whatever those things are. It's important that you've gone through that process at the beginning, because if you know that that's what you're trying to do, then the next thing you're going to do is set up your system so that it gives you those outcomes. So at least you can see whether you're achieving them or not. You have the right fields in place, the right stuff on the forms to get that. And so if that's where you started, what do you train your team on? Level 1 is the minimum that the teams, the users, need to know to be able to achieve the business outcomes that you've put in place. Sometimes I'll go out and I'll talk to a company and they'll say, they're having this problem or that problem, and I will, they'll say, we don't have adoption. And I say, well, that makes sense. A lot of companies have struggled with adoption. And then I'll say, well, what is it that you want them to adopt? What are they not doing? And they'll say things like, they're just not using it. Well, what exactly is it that we'd like them to use it for? Opportunities and activities and stuff. And then I can pretty much zero in on what the problem is, right? Because CRM offers a whole ton of stuff in terms of the software, but only a small part of it is important to the organization. The place where you also get lost there is if you think that your goal is to entice your salespeople to use the system, if that's your goal, then you're going to have a really hard time getting adoption. There is a level of what you're doing that has to be very systematic. It has to be very reinforced by the team. This is what we're doing. It doesn't actually matter whether you like it or not. That's the hard part of this conversation, because we have salespeople on the phone. Do we want to make it easier for them? Absolutely. Is making it easy for the salespeople so that they don't have to do anything the goal? No, not when you initially release a phase. You want to do as best you can, but that's not the goal. It'll throw you completely off track, right, if that's what you're trying to do. They get a ton in terms of productivity and all those things. The driver has to be, we're getting the minimum that we can for the business to get what it needs. And you reinforce it by tracking it and following. And at that point, when you get adoption, everything changes. Because up until then, the numbers that you're looking at, the reports and everything that you've decided are important don't mean anything because everybody's not using them. But at the minute you actually have adoption, all of that stuff starts to make sense, and you start to be able to make decisions, and you start to know what's working and what's not working, and you start to know where you can make improvements in your system. So getting to adopted is the first goal, the first thing that you want to get out the gate when you release a new version, roll out a new phase, move into service when you were only doing sales before, whatever that is. That's how you want to think about it. I've got to get to adoption. And I'm going to talk about how you actually get to adoption here in just a minute. And beyond that, you get to productive, which is where now that we're doing the minimum and we can start to see what's happening in the business, you develop or lay out a training system that allows you to give the right people the right training at the right time. And now the salespeople really start to get what they want, right? Get what they need. Oh, it's on mobile. I'm already using it. I know exactly how that works. You know what's funny is I'm still putting my appointments in my Franklin Day Planner, but I can see there's a spot to do that in CRM. Wouldn't it be neat to be able to have that attached to the customers that I'm already working with? You know what? I need somebody from inside sales to do some follow-up for me. How cool would it be if I could just select the records that I want and say send email, and they would have a link exactly to those records, and they wouldn't have to think about how to get there. All right, that's level 2 production. And that's also where, as the software changes and all that thing, you're showing them the new stuff. Because what happens is if you don't do that training later on, they never get there because they don't know. They're doing their jobs every day. They don't know what's possible, how it works. They don't know how to extend what they're doing. They don't know how to use the new stuff that comes out. And you don't want them using all the new stuff that comes out. You just want them using the parts that apply to them. So you have to think about that as you're rolling it out. So that's productive. This top level is where I would like to see us get. And that is where you are CRM ready, which is what this entire conversation is about. When you get to CRM ready, the value that you get from CRM just continues to grow and grow and grow. And the reason why is because you now have a system that says, for this year, for this quarter, for this year, we are going to be focused on increasing the conversions that we get from quote to win. We're going to focus 100% on that, and we're going to watch the numbers, and we're going to see what's working, and we're all going to talk about the same thing, and we're all going to look at it on the same charts. But things may change in our industry. We may decide we're going to move in a different direction. We may do that really well and decide we want to do something different. So for next year, for next quarter, do something different. But it becomes really easy for you to just dump these things that you want into the system and make the system work for you and start to drive those incomes. That's where we're going. So here's what a CRM Ready organization looks like. This is what a CRM Ready organization looks like. It has 3 components to it. Right off to the left, that is what we call the organizational structure. It has a structure that works. And this is not a let's get CRM up and running for now structure. This is an ongoing structure that stays in place. That's important. You do that when CRM is an initiative. The second piece is that CRM University piece. I talked about level 1, level 2, level 3 training and what that means. You have to have a system for training the right people on the right stuff at the right time. The third component is what we call recurrence, right, or scheduling. And what that means is this is on somebody's calendar, right, in 2 levels. And I'll talk about what those are when we get to it, but remember it's an initiative. You can't have an initiative that you're not regularly following up on and making adjustments to and changing and determining, are you winning or not? Are we doing what we wanted to do, what we thought we were going to do or not? And that's what happens in recurrence. If you have those 3 things, every successful organization that I've seen has those 3 things. All right, so let's talk about this first one. In the first one, what I've said is you've got 3 levels here. If you guys can see my mouse. At the very top level, this is the part where you guys can look at each other and grin knowingly. You have a leadership team that sits at the very top of everything that happens in CRM, and they are responsible for generating business outcomes, number 1. What are the things that we're trying to do? Strategies, right? At the highest level, what do we care about? Right now, is competition getting tight and we need to really focus on making sure that we're loving our customers and extending lifetime value, or is it something else? What are the outcomes that we want from our initiative? That's number 1. The second thing that they are ultimately responsible for is communicating that to the team. especially their core team and their CRM admins. What is it that we're actually trying to get accomplished? Because they're the ones that are going to have to build it. The third thing that that leadership team is really responsible for is reinforcement. And I'm going to tell you some words that you guys want to use regularly for those of you that are in leadership. CRM is not optional. It's not optional. As long as it's seen as optional in the organization, or I know that my boss doesn't care, you will not get adoption. If I can show up to a sales meeting, and in that sales meeting I can talk about deals and things that I'm working on that aren't in CRM, you will not get adoption. Right? That's what leadership is responsible for doing. On the left side, you have what's called the core team. Your core team are your subject matter experts, the people from across the organization, and this is going to be really big for us as we start to figure out how we're going to work together. We have to make sure that everybody's represented, but we can't have a big, huge team. The core team needs to be 5 to 8, maybe 10 people at the most that represent the business, that are willing to go out and have conversations with people about the business. But here's the key piece of being on the core team. They have to be a power user of CRM. They have to be a power user. They can't be an arms folded, hey, go build some stuff for me so I can get reports person. They have to know how it works. They have to be able to speak in CRM terms to be on that team. And there's reasons for that, right? If they're on that team, then you have these people are the ones that are helping everybody else to understand what you're doing. They're also the ones that know the organization, so they can say, I know how CRM works, and I'm looking at what you're doing right there. That's low-hanging fruit, right? We can CRM in 10 minutes and completely change it because we're using the exact same accounts. So they're the ones that help you not go into development mode every time you want to get something done because they can see it. And they're the translators of the vision, right? What leadership wants, they're the ones that are, so this is how we're actually going to use it in the business. And this is what makes sense. And this is what we should train on because we know what our level 1 training should be based on having created that. Right? Power users, drive the vision. And that third piece over there on the right are your CRM admins. I think we have across the organization some CRM admins already. There is a way that we think about this CRM admin. In most organizations, you got to have at least one, but you know, in many they have 2 or 3. But there's usually one that's the guy that we call him. Doesn't mean it has to be a male, but we just call him the guy. And that is the person who is technical and understands everything that CRM is capable of doing. They don't have to be able to do it all. They're not writing code and all that, but they can configure from A to Z. They know everything about user setup. They know how it works. They know how to create entities and all that techie stuff, but they also know how to speak business. They know how to they can understand what the core team is trying to do and keep them from going off the rails. So when the core team meets, the admin meets. And if you imagine that this admin actually really understands how CRM works, start to picture in your mind how quickly things can change. We've got this new initiative that we're starting. They have a conversation with the core team. If the core team is delivering requirements or needs in a way that fit how CRM works, well, you know, what is that, a day of configuration, depending upon what it is? Or 2 or 3? That's what you're going for. How quickly can I make CRM do exactly what we need to do? And when you have this structure in place, that's what you get. And they're all working together in different capacities. And you see that spot in the center, and that is that the partner that you choose should not be driving what you are doing in your system over time. It doesn't mean that they don't help you, but you have to own your system. 90% of what you need to do in your system on a day-to-day basis in terms of configuration and changes and whatever, you should be able to do yourself. Over time, your partner should become more about helping you with strategy, helping you move from a place in your business that you're working on CRM to a place that you haven't worked. So we're going to move into service, and we've never done that before. We're going to move into marketing, and we've never done that before. Help us understand how that should work. They should help you with things that are outside of your technical capability, right? If we're integrating to other systems and we don't have somebody on hand who, you know, understands how to build that integration, you don't want to hire for that because it's a short-term need. So your partner should be able to help you with that. And any overflow work, right? If you know how to do it and you could do it yourself, but I need to get it done quickly, then you should have your partner helping with that. But your partner does not own your system. I've gone out to see customers who actually have no idea had to change anything in their system, and the system has basically been the same for 4 years. And when they need a new field or a new something silly, a new form or whatever, they have to call somebody. Think about that. That's not how it's supposed to be. And so that's what that structure gives you. For those of us that are already working in CRM in some capacity or another, here's a couple of things to think about to let you know if you have a structure problem. You have a structure problem if IT is complaining that they keep building things that aren't used. You guys get that? What happens is in many organizations, once CRM is rolled out, now it's IT's thing. And around trying to figure out what the business needs. And they're saying, look at this. I don't know why they won't use it. Happens all the time. That's because you're not structured correctly, right? You don't have that structure in place. IT should not be driving. You have an over-engineered solution that you can't upgrade. Dynamics CRM is highly configurable. And you can write code if you need to. But that's not the goal. You don't want to buy a system that you have to develop, over-develop on to make it do what you want. So if they're driving what you're doing, you end up with an over-engineered solution. And when it comes time to upgrade, now you're mad because you can't or it's not easy. If you have no clear definition, like I was talking about earlier, of what adoption is, how would we know if we actually had adoption? If you don't know what that is, then you don't have the right structure in place. Right? That means that your leadership team did not drive down exactly what you want, and you weren't able to say, if we're going to get those outcomes, these are the things that we need to be measuring and capturing and making sure that people are doing. If you have customizations in your system that no one claims, how that happens is you have an organization, especially a large organization, and we are at risk of this, right? If we move to where we're all working on this thing together, but we have IT sitting in the middle and we do not have a core team that is actually filtering and working through the changes that they, that are appropriate for the system and agreeing, then what you get is random people going to IT saying, I need this and I need that, just trying to help. And pretty soon you look at your system and you have no idea how half of the stuff got there. And you're not measuring anything because everyone's using it different. You have no system in place. Does that make sense? Yep. Right? The business has all kinds of workarounds to get things done. This is when you have the business driving everything, and IT isn't really expert on how anything works, and so every time they need a change or something else, they're creating spreadsheets and updating data, and even though the system is there, it's not really helping them. They're just trying to get their work done, so they come up with a whole ton of workarounds. And you start to lose adoption. So those are the things that happen if you have a structure problem. I imagine, I'm not there, I imagine that there were at least a couple of those as you were going through where you could look across or look at somebody that you know and shake your head up and down because you know what that means. Right? We have that, or we're missing this, or whatever it is. That's the stuff I want you guys to take away and be able to talk about after. So here is the general structure for how things should work. You keep hearing me use the term phase or release. And you're using those because this is an initiative. CRM is supposed to change over time, right? The way that it should work is if you look down here in the lower left at a high level, leadership comes up with business outcomes, the tactics. So a business outcome might be we want to improve or increase the revenue that we're getting from our existing accounts because we deal mostly with current customers. Our universe of customers is known. So we want to increase the business that we're getting from them. And the tactics might be, well, if we're going to do that, we believe that a leading indicator for us is the more often we visit a customer, the more that they're going to buy from us, the better our relationship over time. So if we want to increase that number, we're going to make sure that we are visiting our customers, especially those in our top tier accounts or whatever it is, more frequently. And so how would we measure that? We would measure that with, how many visits we're having to those customers. And that goes to the core team and the admins, right? And they build it, right, based on what it is that they want. Now I'm going to show you the part where it gets lost. So they start designing and building around the outcomes that you've come up with, and they go through, work streams or work, right? That's a process that they're trying to resolve. And at the end, they're going to do a final review. Even if you use a partner, they should be doing a final review of this is what we built and this is why we built it. And they should be doing that final review for the leadership team. Otherwise, you don't actually know if what's been created does anything about the outcomes that you wanted. It's a big part of the puzzle. So they do that final review, and now you know exactly what your user adoption criteria is. The business outcomes, you probably have some dashboard that shows number of visits by region, by company, by unit, however you want to set that up. And you've got dashboards that allow everyone in the organization to look at the exact same thing, because this is what we're doing. It sounds like a lot of work, but making this thing work the way that it's supposed to, once you set it up, it's easy. But if you never set it up, it turns into a nightmare for you. So just to cover off on what the core team does, I have CRM steering team right here. What I want you guys to remember is the words that I'm using are not important. The structure needs to be in place. You call it whatever whatever makes sense to you. We use the term core team most often because they're core to what's happening in the implementation. So in this case, you've got the core team sitting here. Over time, now I've released the software, and many organizations, once they get something out the door, right, everybody takes a sigh of relief and goes back to their job, which is not what you want to happen. You can have some people go back, but you need to have a core set of subject matter experts that know what you're trying to do in place. And what they're doing is they're taking feedback from the users, right? What's really not working? You guys are killing me. You're making my job miserable. My contacts aren't showing up, whatever those things are. They're looking at what we've already planned to do, right, going forward, and they're looking at what Microsoft might be releasing that applies to the business or whatever, and they are taking into account executive strategy. Right, so as things change, as the leadership team decides, we're doing different things, moving in a different direction, they're taking that input. But you see how that's central. Nothing gets into the system that doesn't go through that loop. And that way you always have the right things going out. You always have people that know how what you're doing affects everything else, and then you just roll it out, right? Release or phase or whatever you want to call it after phase as often as makes sense. When you first roll something out, a major phase or something like that, you're usually going to roll it out and have a few really quick releases afterwards with the 4 things that you missed, right? Or the 4 things that if you do this, you're going to make the salesperson's life a lot easier. My one little cue in there for those of us that are on the leadership team is during that period, you cannot say, let's not use it for now. Right? We've got to, once we start, we've got to try and keep pushing until we get it to the place that it's usable. And that's where we owe the users getting some things done quickly, but you can't let them stop. If you do, it is really hard to get them started again. So that's what that organizational structure is for. Now I want to hit on probably the most important lead-in to whether or not you actually get adoption, and that is how you train. I've called it CRM University here. This is the things that you want to think about when you're rolling out training. You want to think about the application, and you want to think about those levels that I talked about earlier. When you first release it, you want to make sure that you train on level 1. Over time, 3 months down the road, you want to make sure that you train on level 2. You start to get real value there from the organization. And level 3 training is when you have people on your team that sit down and go, hey, one of our biggest competitors just went out of business. Let me sit down at my computer and find all the companies that we currently work with that are mine that have worked with that competitor. And by the way, let's go look at all the deals we lost over the last 2 years to that competitor and create a list. And I want to shoot all of them a quick email today that just says, Dear Joe, Dear John, Dear Frank, hey, I heard about what happened with XYZ competitor. Bummed for you. But if you find that you need help, I'm more than happy to jump in and write. And so now they have used the system the way that you want them to ultimately be able to use it, to interrogate it, spend less time and get high value. But that doesn't happen at the beginning. You've got to get them there. So that's your level 3 training. But that's just the application stuff. How does it work? In most cases, when you are rolling out training, you're actually rolling out process that they've never worked through before. If you think about how we might work together over time, we've got a unit that has their own way of doing sales and working in their own system, and we have, our way. And it may be defined in a sales process, and it may not. It may be structured, and it may not. But when you roll out CRM, you're going to give them some level of process, and it may be for the first time. And to waste that opportunity of actually delivering process consistently to everybody, we're doing it in the system for sure, but it's not about the system. It's about what we're trying to do and why we're doing it. right? Here's the difference. We have 4 steps in our sales process, and in each step you're going to fill out some fields. Well, that's application stuff, right? Process stuff is, in our business, you don't move from qualify to needs assessment unless you know, number one, that you're talking to the contact, to the decision maker, number two, that you've received a budget, whatever those things are, and now we're actually training them around the system. So you want to think about process training as well. You want to think about what you do with new people that you hire. That completely falls apart in many organizations. New guy comes on, what does he get? He gets 10 minutes in the back room with, somebody showing him how to click around. Wasted opportunity to get them on the same page. And then you've got, how are you training your managers versus your end users? This is so important. I'm going to spend a couple of seconds on it. I've seen this so many times it hurts me. And that is where you have delivered training to the end users, and the first time that they have a question about what they're doing or why they're doing it, they go to their sales manager, and what does the sales manager say? I don't know why they did that. You are on your way to not having adoption. For your managers on your team, a portion of what they're responsible for, the larger portion, is driving adoption. They have to learn how to run a sales meeting based on the numbers that are in CRM. They have to learn how to go in and understand what it means that you have, this many opportunities in that phase, and how to work through that, and how to tell who's done what. And they need to know how to use the system to coach, not oppress, so that everybody can get better. So you want to train your managers and your end users differently as you're rolling out the system. So I said that this was the most important component of adoption. And here's what I mean by that. I want you guys to walk away thinking about this whole adoption concept as if you were raising Rottweiler puppies. They're cute, right? Anybody in the room ever raised a Rottweiler puppy? I have. This is what I can tell you about raising a Rottweiler puppy. They're so cute, right, and so cuddly at the very beginning, but if you've ever owned one, what you know is that if you don't put in the time, if you don't apply the discipline to make sure that they know who's in charge, how things are supposed to work, all of those things, in that first 3 to 6 months of their life, you are going to have 10, 12 years of misery. So you got to put in the work up front. If you do, you end up with a lifetime of, of a great dog who'll do anything. I had a Rottweiler, and you would not imagine the things that my son could do to that dog without having him even get upset. But you got to put in the work up front, and that's the way you want to think about adoption. So when you're laying out your training needs to look like this, almost exactly like this. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it, but this is the concept. The concept is that when you're getting ready to release something, the first thing you want to do, if you can, is train your managers. Why? Because we already talked about that, right? They should understand what's coming so that they know how to talk to their team about it. You want to make sure that when they train, they have access to the system. So it shouldn't be you just standing in front of them for 2 hours and then you say go home and everybody, you assume that everybody knows how to use the system, because that's not what happens. So you want to give them that training, give them access to a system, whether it's the actual system or a sandbox or whatever it is, and you want to deliver that training either live via the web or over an LMS or on your internal intranet or whatever it is. The majority of our customers today are delivering that through an LMS, and the reason why is because an LMS allows us to know who has done what. LMS stands for Learning Management System, by the way. Sometimes I forget that. Now, if you look below this level 1 training, which is the minimum that they need to understand how to do to deliver the outcomes that the business wants, then you have to know. This is another thing that a learning management system gives you, is who did it. They have to do it. With salespeople, imagine how this goes sometimes. Oh, I can't make the training because I've got a big sales meeting. And then I'll get back around to it, but nobody's really checking, and they never do. And you have already started them down a path of not getting any real value, number one, and not knowing what they're supposed to do. So this is the Rottweiler puppy part. You're going to check to see who has done what. Those that have not done this training, this is where they're going to have a conversation, not with IT, but with their manager, or somebody at least that they respect, right, in their direct line of, hey, what's going on, right? We said that we were going to do this. We weren't joking about doing it. CRM is not optional. Let's get on board. So you pull the Rottweiler puppies out, you get them where they need to be, and then you are always going to do a live training. So some companies love the whole concept of video. We do. We're very big on video. But it should not be the be-all, end-all. Video is intended to save you time. So you let your users go through and train and take it at their own pace and rewind and do it again and try it in the system. And what should happen when they show up for live training is you don't have to spend a whole bunch of time talking about navigation and forms and fields and all that stuff. You can spend all of your time talking about our process, how we're going to use it. Anything that wasn't covered in the training that they need to know. You're going to answer any questions that they have about how it's supposed to work. And this part is critical. You are going to assign work to them. You have to assign something. As the sales manager, what you're going to say is something like, so here's what we're going to do. This is great. I know you guys already know how to use it. Great questions. In between now and Friday or next Friday or whatever it is, I want everybody to take all the opportunities that you currently have in this XYZ spreadsheet, and I want you to get them into the system. And you need to make sure, at a minimum, as we've talked about, that we have an estimated close date, we have an estimated revenue amount, we know who the decision maker is, we know what the stage of the sales process is, whatever those things are, and then you're going to measure it. One of the beautiful things about what you have, right, in terms of CRM is it's built to, quickly create a dashboard or a chart to show you something, right? And so if you do that in 1 week or 2 weeks, I now know who gets it, who's in the system doing what they need to do, and we can start to have our management meetings all around where things are in the system, and I also know who's not getting there. Right? These are my Rottweiler puppies. Didn't get it, didn't do it, have excuses, whatever it is. And this is where I pick those up. And then you're going to have an adoption period. And during this adoption period, that's when your managers are using the system for every meeting that they have every week. And when people on the team say, oh, yeah, and I'm working with this one new company that I drove by, and, that looks like it's going to be a big deal, their job is to say, no, you're not. What do you mean? Well, no, we're looking at the deals you're working on. They're right here. So for sales managers, another thing for you to think about is get used to saying, if it's not in CRM, it did not happen. It doesn't take very much of that, and all of a sudden everybody knows, okay, I get it. Right? This is not optional. I have to do this part. And when you have adoption, that's when you begin to roll out that level 2 training, all the really cool, neat stuff that's going to add to their life and make them even more productive. I have salespeople on the phone, so somebody's got to be thinking, that sounds like a lot of work, right? And it is. That's what most people aren't going to tell you up front, right? But that's how you get there, and it's foolproof. I can tell you it's foolproof because the way that we developed that was specifically, we had been doing the processes for a while, but we had a company that came to us that had failed multiple times over a 5-6 year period. I mean, really failed, right? Brand new software. They had spent hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars getting to where they were, which was nowhere, right? They had divisions all around, 19 different divisions. The ones that were using it different, no coordinated sales process, none of that stuff. And what they said and what we agreed to with them was they were on an older version of CRM. They came to us saying that they wanted to upgrade. What we said was, you know what? If we can't get adoption with the version that you have right now, you're getting ready to spend a whole bunch of money for nothing because the software is not going to change it. And that was the system, exactly the system that we used to get them to 100% adoption before they upgraded, and they did.